In a surprise twist I genuinely did not see coming, infamous YouTuber Rachel Oates has come out swinging, seemingly lying to defend her friend Vangelina Skov after I caught Skov plagiarising my work. Why? Well, because people were criticising Rachel Oates for fence-sitting regarding the UK-backed genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Not gonna deny, I am as shocked as you are on this one. But before we continue, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, abuse, self-harm, suicide, gaslighting, misogyny, Gaza, genocide, sexual assault, and grooming. If you like our work and appreciate the research put into each video, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon. You can also support us by liking, commenting, and sharing this video on social media. I'd also just like to take this time to remind our viewers that the statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is precisely why we reference everything, because we're fallible. We strive to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence for yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked below. As such, we encourage all viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we're here to talk about how, just as I was wrapping up my script on Vangelina Skov, Rachel Oates came out of nowhere and began lying about what Skov had done in order to defend her. The video on Skov is, of course, now published, and in it I demonstrate how every single screenshot from a 30-minute section of her video, Lily Orchard, YouTube's biggest creep, was ripped from our series, Lily Orchard is a child predator, using data triangulation, before also going on to show how everything said surrounding those screenshots was also plagiarized. Skov even asserted that the point I made about Lily Orchard baiting victims by sending questions to herself, an accusation based on Levi's special insight as a former Lily Orchard community member, was the very first thing that popped into her head. It is a very open-shut case in my mind, and I'd urge you to watch said video for yourself if you haven't already, since I don't want to spend much time repeating myself. I'll only be showing specific pieces of evidence that contradict the lies Rachel Oates is trying to sell. You might also want to consider watching my recent series, dubbed the Mainline series, in which I provide evidence of Rachel Oates having a long and drawn-out history of transmisia. To understand her relation to me specifically, I suggest checking out the video Surviving Rachel Oates, a Trans Victim's Testimony, in which I open up about the way in which she abused me personally, how that impacted me, and how she gaslit her audience into thinking she was the victim. My editor, Levi, also had a run-in with her, this is before he and I had ever talked, in which Oates tried to demonize him as just another angry trans person. You can find out more about that in the video Rachel Oates published private emails from a transgender audience member. If you're in the UK, you'll need to use one of the mirrors hosted on the video master list, as Rachel Oates has tried to suppress the evidence by abusing YouTube's defamation system, and we are waiting until the 5th and final video in the Mainline series goes out before we pay to have them restored. Thankfully, a couple months back, Oates and her solicitor gave us the exact piece of evidence we needed to show that she is just abusing YouTube's reporting system, so we're just sitting on that until the 5th video is out. But before we can move on to the stuff regarding Rachel Oates, there are a number of very important updates to cover regarding Vangelina Skov, stuff I didn't know at the time of writing and recording either video, yet gives vital context. The first is the fact that, prior to plagiarizing me, Skov had gone after HBomberguy over his incredible video regarding YouTube plagiarism. After HBomberguy criticized the general laziness of drama YouTube, noting how it created the very environment that rewarded people like Illuminati for plagiarizing, a section during which he showed a whole 2-second image of Skov's channel, Skov published a 20-minute rant going after him. HBomberguy's video clearly struck a nerve in them, and now we know why. Another thing I want to bring attention to is the fact that Vangelina Skov lashed out at the people criticizing them over their response, with Skov declaring that, quote, "HBomberguy isn't going to fuck you, by the way, so you can probably tone it down a notch. Kiss." End quote. This is a sexual comment that is quite clearly intended to degrade the people criticising them. I mention that since, according to Rape Crisis, England and Wales, sexual harassment refers to someone engaging in, quote, unwanted conduct of a sexual nature, end quote, that, quote, has the purpose or effect of either violating the other person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for them, end quote. They then further expand on this by giving us 19 examples. I'm not going to read them all, but I just wanted to note a few key ones which are relevant to this topic. Those examples are, quote, sexual comments or noises, for example, catcalling or wolf whistling, sexual jokes, sexual post or contact on social media, and lastly, spreading sexual rumours, end quote. So, whilst Vangelina Skov clearly intended this as a joke, being a joke does not exclude it from the realm of sexual harassment. It is therefore my opinion that they sexually harass their critics, something that has been normalised under rape culture. This is something creators like Skov seem all too comfortable doing, and, as a survivor of child rape, I'd like to see that change. If you feel the need to make sexual remarks about someone, even someone you're angry at, don't. It's really that simple. Another thing that was brought to my attention was this post published by Skov last month. Do note that I've added a black bar for the OP's protection. Now, at first, this comment might seem reasonable, but that changes once we acknowledge the context. The state of Idaho has made multiple attempts to classify any form of gender nonconformity, including both cross-dressing and gender-affirming care, as child sexual abuse. There was even a law that was set to go into effect on the 1st of January of this year, classing gender-affirming care as a felony offence, meaning it could be punished with sentences ranging from imprisonment for over a year to the death penalty. Thankfully, it was blocked by a federal judge, but this is what Idaho is pushing right now. Then, in February, Idaho passed a bill that would extend the punishment for child sexual abuse to include the death penalty, leading multiple people, including the person Skov is quote tweeting, to point out how said law would be used to target and execute LGBT+ people, specifically trans people, or those supporting trans people. To which Skov responded, stating that, quote, the fact that you see the word pedophile and your mind immediately jumps to LGBTQ people seems like the bigger issue, end quote. Which, fucking yikes. Way to completely purge the comment of all essential context, effectively declaring that the trans community calling out the fact that the far right has broadened the definition of child sexual assault to include any form of gender nonconformity is proof that we as trans people are the ones conflating the two and are thus the bigger issue. Way to go! It's worth noting that the reason I was able to source a copy of the original, now deleted post is because someone else made a pretty similar argument to Skov, and that person was Chaya Rychik, founder of the Libs of TikTok hate brand. Rychik is a stochastic terrorist who promotes the myth that the LGBT+ community is inherently predatory to encourage others to impart violence against us. To that effect, she is connected to at least 21 bomb threats made to various institutions across the US, including children's hospitals. That is the person Vangelina Skov is brushing shoulders with in their original post. And in case you're wondering whether Skov simply missed the context, aside from the fact that it was pretty clear in the post they retweeted, not to mention that framing the LGBT+ community as pedophiles isn't exactly a new tactic, there were numerous people who pointed out the exact context in Skov's replies. Vangelina Skov saw these replies, yet chose to keep the post up, where it remains to this day, framing trans people as the ones with bigger issues for acknowledging what the far right is in the process of doing. Suffice to say, this adds additional context to the transmisia in their comment section discussed in the previous video, as well as their close friendship with Rachel Oates. Today's video relates to a series of posts made by Rachel Oates on Reddit, specifically to a page in which someone was criticising her rather horrific Instagram story regarding the UK-backed genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Oates' Instagram story was a response to people noting her refusal to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. In said post, Oates quickly gives a generic "I oppose genocide and murder," yet trivialises the issue by refusing to even acknowledge who is committing the genocide against who. She then goes on to say that since she's not an expert, she shouldn't be asked to let people know where she stands on the relatively simple matter that is the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, acting like you need to be a social scientist or historian in order to figure things out. You don't. If my home ex-mother, who has worked as a dinner lady and then a postal worker her entire life, can figure it out, your university-educated backside really has no excuse. Suffice to say, I can see why this post was called out. It's not just passively turning away, as Oates was doing previously, it is her actively excusing said behaviour whilst attacking those criticising her for it. It tells us that she's aware and that that's the path she wants to take. She just believes she can order people to stop judging her for doing so, claiming incredulity as an excuse. This, of course, reeks of privilege. Oates and myself, as UK citizens who both pay taxes, because yes, I still pay taxes in the UK, though I'm thinking about changing that after all this, our money is directly funding the genocide in Gaza. Maybe not as much as Americans in the US, but it is nonetheless. Our hands are not clean. We have a duty, if we're not already informed, to do so and to then support the Palestinian people however we can. Because this is being done by the consent of the British people, which again includes both myself and Rachel Oates. This is why, whilst I haven't produced a video on the topic for actual safety reasons related to my geography, if you know you know, I have ensured that I continue to amplify Palestinian voices through my social media. I was also the first to call out the propagandists when they began editing the Wikipedia page for LGBT+ rights in Palestine, with said propagandists editing out the fact that anti-LGBT+ laws currently in place in Gaza were introduced under British rule, same for those in the West Bank, which has since been removed. Something you don't often hear about is how the West Bank did so before colonial for Israel, just something to keep in mind the next time someone tries to pinkwash for Israel. It's also worth noting that there is no evidence of said colonial laws actually being enforced in Gaza. They're relics of British occupation that haven't yet been destroyed, at least in part, because of the colonial occupation by for Israel. Palestinians, Gazans more specifically, have more pressing matters than removing inactive laws. Yet returning to the post, the least Oates could do is name who is committing the genocide, who is enabling it, and who is being made to suffer it. So, the colonial for Israel, the US and the UK, and the Palestinian people. That's the bare minimum she had to say, yet she couldn't even do that. She only posted about the issue when discussions surrounding said genocide inconvenienced her comfort. Literally, that's all this post is complaining about. Oates was made to feel like a bad person due to her choice and actions, which of course, in her mind, makes it everyone else's fault. That is the epitome of entitlement. Truly, does she have no shame that she thought it a good idea to fucking complain about the people that asked her why she, a self-declared feminist, wasn't doing more? And if you don't know that Palestine is a feminist issue, you have to remember that for Israel has crippled Gaza's medical infrastructure after half a century of slow depletion. Everyone, including pregnant people, most cis women, are having to be operated on in dirty conditions without anesthesia. They are being starved and put under such duress that many of them can no longer produce milk, and they are being murdered and sexually assaulted by for Israel. Even outside of the extremes, women, as with everyone else, are so deprived of basic amenities that they are having to destroy their own tents, what little shelter many of them have, just to make menstrual pads. So yes, the occupation of Palestine and the ongoing genocide are feminist issues. They're just not white feminist issues, which, in my opinion, is all Oates ever cared about. She only cares about how things affect her personally. That's where the compassion starts and ends. Now, Oates would go on to make another Instagram story after she was banned from said subreddit, wishing everyone there a terrible day, crying about the fact that she's expected to stand by her declared principles, stating that she wishes she could just post stuff without the need to interact. Which, you can? Just turn your comments off and stop going after people criticizing you? Like, I don't spend every waking minute responding to people spouting the lies Oates spread about me because I know that the evidence is there for anyone who genuinely wants to know what went down. Oates is conflating not being allowed to silence her critics with not being allowed to withhold interaction. People criticizing her doesn't force her to respond. That is a choice she made. The entire thing reminds me of the time Oates invaded a trans subreddit, Turf is a Fetish, harassing one of its members, trying to force them to delete a post sharing evidence of her terrible behaviour, only to be banned from there too. Fun fact, I was also banned, initially, as a moderator mistook me for her, only for them to catch their mistake and apologise to me. Returning to Oates, however, being banned didn't stop her from brigading that very same subreddit, as more trans people came forward and began sharing evidence of her terrible behaviour. I believe she was brigading said post since one of the main people sharing evidence is someone I know, who, after they blocked the couple dozen accounts who had never posted to that subreddit before, stopped receiving abusive comments. We talked about this and how it implies to us that said comments were likely those of a few radical members of Oates' audience that she could rally to defend her honour on the server she was banned from, much like the comments in support of her original Gaza post. It's interesting how, as much as a monster as she tries to paint me, I've never been banned from multiple subreddits for harassing people criticising me. So, with the post itself addressed, how the fuck does this involve me, Vangelina Skov, and Lily Orchard? Well, as people continue to discuss things, a number of them began raising issues with other things Oates has done, such as propagating the mutual abuser myth in support of Johnny Depp, and, rather naturally, the way in which she has mistreated the trans community over the years, myself and Levi included. That's when Rachel Oates turned up and began the usual circus of going after people discussing the evidence we'd provided. Now, I've gone ahead and linked a snapshot of her user profile containing all the posts I will be covering today. I won't be responding to everything, just what she said regarding Skov and a few other things I feel are worth addressing, but feel free to read through what she has said. Note, most of her claims are debunked in our mainline series, so if you'd like to know my thoughts on anything that isn't covered here, I suggest checking that series out. All of our claims are fully referenced, as always. So, amongst her usual bullshit, Oates let slip the following. Quote, "Currently, EOT is attempting to extort money from a friend of mine. Just after I mentioned I was friends with her in a video, EOT has decided that my friend has plagiarized their video because they cover the same topic and use some of the same screenshots. This is despite the fact that my friend has never seen an EOT video out of principle of the way they have treated me and have provided the sources for where she found her screenshots. Despite this, EOT has not gone through any legitimate channels, but instead resorted to repeatedly emailing and messaging my friend, demanding 30% of her video, Patreon, and sponsorship income, or they will make a video exposing her. These emails are complete with nonsense buzzwords which mean nothing in context, like proving plagiarism through data triangulation, which doesn't even make sense. They're trying to scare money out of her when she's done nothing wrong, and it's cruel." End quote. This is, of course, a reference to the email I sent Vangelina Skov regarding the plagiarism of our series Lily Orchard is a Child Predator, seen in her video Lily Orchard, YouTube's Biggest Creep. Again, go watch the previous video for the exact details of what was done/said. Returning to Oates' post itself, There's a lot to unpack here, starting of course with the conspiracy that I made the allegations about Skov upon discovering that the two were friends. Now, my source on the post was very helpful in that they also provided me with a link to the stream in question, How Did Colin Hoover Get Even Worse?, which does indeed contain the following.
I sent this to Elise and Vangelina Skov in our group chat, and I was like, if I've had to read this, you have to too. I'm a good friend.
That's it. One single mention in a 2-hour 41-minute video I had no intention of watching until my source sent it to me. Yet Rachel Oates wants you to believe that, out of everyone she has ever associated with, for some reason I singled out Vangelina Skov and... what exactly? Hacked into her computer and edited her video to make it appear like she plagiarized me? What's the through line here? How do we go from the two of you being friends to her uploading a video in which she plagiarized me? There's a complete breakdown of logic when we actually stop to think about it. So allow me to offer an alternative hypothesis. I, someone who spent years working on a series regarding Lily Orchard, saw someone else had uploaded a video on her and went to watch it out of curiosity. Whilst there, I realised I'd been plagiarised and set about trying to reach Skov, only to subsequently be burnt by her, leading me to publish my findings. Only as I finished my script did I learn that the two of you knew each other, so I added a couple lines referencing this fact. I'll leave it up to the audience to decide which of these scenarios is more likely. As for the coincidence that the two of you are friends, I also have a hypothesis for that. You, Rachel Oates, are a terrible person who hangs around with equally terrible people that enable you. Because, as we'll see in the upcoming 5th video in the mainline series, this is nowhere near the first time you've buddied up with some absolute monsters. Take, for example, the one guy who publicly rage quit Twitter after being called out for targeting and dead-naming a 7-year-old trans girl who was also an abuse victim in the months immediately before you went on to publicly thank him for his support. This is not an uncommon occurrence for you, this is a pattern of behaviour. That said, there is one potential through line that was brought to my attention by a couple of different people, especially in light of the line reading, quote, "This is despite the fact that my friend has never seen an EOT video out of principle of the way they treated me and has provided the sources for where she found her screenshots," end quote. And that is the possibility that Rachel Oates gave Vangelina Skov the green light to plagiarize me on the basis of how much she hates me for documenting her behaviour. That's the only reasonable connection I have seen anyone come up with as to how Oates' friendship with Skov led me to calling out and proving Skov's plagiarism. So, if Oates really wants to play a game of speculation, how about we start there? As for the assertion that I was repeatedly emailing and messaging Skov, I sent 2 messages. The first when I reached out to her about the plagiarism, and the second when she tried to pull a fast one by updating her video description to include sources for everyone but me. I messaged her noting the change had occurred, offering her one last chance to fix things before I went public. Both emails were also sent via Twitter since I could see she used it daily. I also posted 2 comments to her video, one standalone and another to the pinned comment, letting her know about the first email since I wanted to resolve the matter as soon as possible. But Oates' wording makes it sound like I was constantly spamming Skov as opposed to letting her respond in her own time, only sending an update when she seemed to be preparing to deny that she'd plagiarized me. Speaking of the fact that Skov edited her description after I contacted her, this exposes another one of Oates' lies, namely the assertion that Skov had, quote, provided the sources for where she found her screenshots, end quote, when no, she hadn't. The only people mentioned in the original video description was the Lily Orchard gossip blog, who have not used my screenshots using their own. Every other reference was added after I approached Skov in private to try and resolve the issue amicably. On top of this, simply linking a nebulous group of sources isn't enough. You need to acknowledge which parts specifically are sourced from where, either by audibly stating such or using a visual marker, such as the reference numbers used on this channel. This allows people to differentiate between your own work and work that has been sourced from elsewhere. What's more is, as mentioned in the video on Scow, her editing the description is, if nothing else, a tacit admission that Scow had plagiarized multiple others on that list. But more than that, to me personally, this reads as her preemptively throwing up chaff in anticipation of my video, allowing her supporters to assert that she had always sourced these people, when no, she didn't. And you can check this for yourself using an archived copy of her description taken the very day I sent her my email. Suffice to say, this to me demonstrates both knowledge and intent on Scow's part, so far as her plagiarism. As for using, quote, some of the same screenshots, end quote, this implies that both I and Scow merely use screenshots from the same source, which is not true. I took the screenshots myself and chose the order in which to cover them, the very same order Scow chose to present them in spite of them not being presented chronologically. Again, check the previous video, specifically the chapter proving Vangelina Skov ripped evidence from our video for hard evidence that this is the case. Since we're already talking about the screenshots, I guess we should address Oates' assertion that my emails were filled with, quote, nonsense buzzwords which mean nothing in context, like proving plagiarism through data triangulation, end quote. This one really is Oates showing her ignorance of research methods. Data triangulation is a basic concept that refers to the use of multiple methods or sources to arrive at a more thorough conclusion, likely getting its name from cell phone triangulation. Cell tower operators can estimate how far away a phone is from any given tower, but they can't tell the direction it is in, meaning they can only plot a circle. However, using the same method and 3 or more towers, forming a triangle, hence the name, you can compare those distances to figure out where a call is being made from, giving you an accurate location. This is why police try to keep people on the line in movies, as the longer the call, the longer the signal, the more accurate the estimated distances are. In my video, I used 3 methods to prove that the screenshots were mine, comparing each one along 3 different variables: zoom factor, secondary visuals like backgrounds and profile pictures, and of course, a security feature that is tailored to me personally. Each one of these is weaker on its own, but together form an ironclad case. So all Oates did here is embarrass herself by pretending to be knowledgeable on a topic, while she has absolutely no idea what the fuck she's talking about, embarrassment she could have spared herself had she just bothered to Google data triangulation. Moving on to Oates' legal claim that I was attempting to, quote, extort money, end quote, namely by, quote, demanding 30% of her video, Patreon and sponsorship income, end quote. This, of course, ignores the fact that I can prove a sizable portion of Scow's video, 12 minutes out of 34, this is excluding her intro and outro, were plagiarized directly from my series. Since that's about a third of the video's core content, I felt it only fair to expect a third of the video's monetary value. This is something known as compensation, specifically for the work that was ripped off. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect to be paid for my work, but I guess Rachel Oates disagrees, hence her lies in defense of Vangelina Skov. It is for these reasons that I personally think it's fair to say that Rachel Oates stands in full support of larger YouTubers plagiarizing smaller marginalized creators. Something else that's probably worth addressing is her statement that I hadn't, quote, gone through any legitimate channels, end quote, because I instead attempted to contact Skov to try and resolve the issue by appealing to her humanity. Which leads me to ask, what proper channels should I have taken? Sadly, from my personal experience, YouTube is only really concerned about direct copying, also known as verbatim plagiarism that is word for word. But most plagiarism, including Scow's own, isn't verbatim. Plagiarists often deliberately change the words and shift around the sentences to try and hide what they're doing. That means I probably would have to involve a court, and honestly, the revenue that video makes would probably be a fraction of the total legal cost, making doing so absurd. That leaves me one option, the court of public opinion, which, in the wake of HBomberguy's video, seemed like a viable option. So that's what I did. After giving Scout multiple opportunities to explain her actions, and, if no reasonable explanation could be given, pay compensation, opportunities she responded to by threatening me with involving a law firm, I went ahead and published the evidence I had. This was done in the public interest, allowing everyone, including Scout's patrons who give her money to produce her own original content, the ability to judge for themselves based on the evidence provided. That is entirely fair. If she didn't want to be called out for plagiarism, she shouldn't have plagiarized. As the phrase goes, fuck around and find out. In closing this chapter, I'd like to remind everyone that Oates herself brought this up in defense of her fence-sitting regarding the genocide of the Palestinian people, and that I wouldn't have known that she was friends with my plagiarist had she not done so. Yet, by going after me unprovoked, she has perhaps done the worst thing she could have, considering how she seeks to bury evidence of her past behaviour. By bringing herself into a video relating to Vangelina Skov and Lily Orchard, Rachel Oates has quite possibly supercharged my mainline series, which again, you should go and watch if you haven't already. Though, since we're here, there are a few other lies I'd like to respond to, the first being seen at the start of the same post as before, in the assertion that, quote, EOT repeatedly lies about me with their story of my crimes getting more and more exaggerated and bizarre all the time. Even their most recent video thumbnail is a direct attempt to re-traumatize me. While I was trying to kill myself, they tweeted a story to mock me, which a photo of a woman crying. Their latest video, in which they conveniently forget to mention the self-harm and suicide, is a cartoon version of this exact image used to mock me, but with blood instead of tears, and the cartoon woman's face designed to look like I did at the time. EOT is openly mocking my suicide attempt again. End quote. The thumbnail is me. Like, look at how bushy the eyebrows are compared to her plucked ones, the brown colour of the hair, Oates's was orange at the time, and the brown eyes, Oates's are greyish blue. Also notice how, in spite of every other video in the series having a photo of her, this was the only one that was a drawn piece. Because these aren't her fake-ass tears, these are an artistic expression of the trauma and suffering she put me through, as detailed in the video, which is titled Surviving Rachel Oates, a Trans Victim's Testimony. This is one of various pieces I made, with many of the others being far more gory in nature, following the lines of how I visualized the psychological damage she did, as described in that video. I actually found the sketch of this piece in my chat with Levi way back in October of last year, noting how it is me. Side note, this was actually the very same day that I received news that Rachel Oates had once again started lying about my pronoun order, which has its own video for you to check out. So Rachel Oates is straight up inventing a narrative to demonize me, lying about her hair and eye colour just to pretend like she's being re-victimized when she was never even victimized in the first place. She targeted me for months whilst I had her blocked, and when I finally snapped and swore at her, telling her that she was responsible for her own actions, she darvoed me. She flipped the abuser-victim narrative, drawing on trans misogyny to paint me as a violent trans femme. Again, for all evidence, check the video Surviving Rachel Oates, a Trans Victim's Testimony, a mirror of which can be found in the master list for those of you in the UK. As for the claim that I never referenced Oates weaponizing self-harm in that video, she must know that I, along with anyone else, can watch said video. At 5:14 AM, within a couple hours of my post, Rachel Oates had recorded, edited, and uploaded a video in which she displayed signs of self-harming. Yet that still leaves the question, was Rachel Oates weaponizing self-harm in the same vein as an abuser? Or was she just speaking out against abuse? By her own standards, she weaponized self-harm in the way of an abuser. Rachel Oates wasn't self-harming because she felt like she had no control over her own life. She was self-harming because she wanted to control my life, my expression, my criticism of her as a person who claims to be an ally to the community I belong to. That is why I can say that Rachel Oates weaponized self-harm in the exact same way as an abuser. Yet returning to the assertion that she didn't weaponize self-harm to control my actions, Rachel Oates lied about Woodford's history of dehumanizing trans people, she lied about me threatening self-harm, she lied about having left me alone for 3 months, she lied about me harassing her when she violated my block, she lied about what she said in the thread weaponizing self-harm, she lied about YouTube having the capacity to legally rule on anything, and she lied about my pronouns. Because, as noted by several of her now former fans, Rachel Oates weaponized self-harm in the exact same way back in 2022, something she has gone on to repeat since I began this current series. Again, there are many examples of her supporters abusing me before this point. See the Noel Plum and Sarah Mitchell post for an idea of what said abuse was like. But following Oates' weaponization of self-harm, things increased by an order of magnitude. Yet, this wasn't the only way Rachel Oates' Darvo and weaponizing of self-harm meant I couldn't seek medical support. That maybe Oates wouldn't have been successful in positioning them so she could weaponize self-harm in the way she did against me to silence the conversation entirely. Yet abusers don't change unless they have to, and there is nothing in Rachel Oates' behavior since 2019 that even suggests she's grown as a person. If anything, she's only gotten worse. Not only did she try to use self-harm to silence me again in 2022 and 2023, but she also lied about the fundamental nature of my pronouns, likely believing that she can get away with lying to her audience due to her history of doing just that. Or even search my script. Right? So I don't know what she was hoping to achieve with a lie that's so easily debunked. Though I guess it does show us how much disdain she has for the intellect of her own viewers, that she thinks they'd be foolish enough to buy it. Another thing I'd like to respond to is an earlier post in which she stated, quote, "EOT has continued to harass me for years and they won't stop. They made, although thankfully some have been deleted now the police are involved, 35 plus videos about me last year alone, but other than trying to defend myself on these Reddit posts, I haven't spoken about them in probably 2 years. I removed any mention of them on my channel." End quote. First of all, I have no knowledge of any police involvement with regards to the current series of videos started last year. This is news to me and pretty much validates everything I said in my testimony video. Secondly, about those 35 videos that have been deleted, it took me a while to figure out that she was on about the couple dozen shorts taken from the first 2 videos. It's a very common practice for creators to take 60-second snippets of their longer videos to then use them as kind of a free advertisement via YouTube Shorts. It's similar to clips on Twitch, meaning it is not unusual, and in case you think Oates simply didn't notice that they were taken from the videos in the mainline series, each short literally has bold text above and below it, reading, quote, "Check the description for the full video," end quote. As for why they were deleted, I found them to take more effort than they were worth. Then, after I stopped making them, a creator I'm interested in explained how, by getting people to subscribe to you on the basis of shorts, that wouldn't necessarily translate to more people watching your long-form content and could actually harm the channel in the long term. That's why I deleted them. It's really that simple. So I find it incredibly scummy for Rachel Oates to present highlights taken from longer videos as their own videos, just so Oates can inflate things, whilst also implying that they were deleted after police involvement. This is especially true considering that, even if the number were true, that'd only mean I produce as many videos on her as she and her now former friends have produced about others, like Girl Defined. So there's not just multiple lies involved, but a big old bucket of hypocrisy to go along with it. Rachel Oates seems to think that she's above everyone else, when she's not. Third, you removed the videos about me on your channel after I told your own viewers to go and watch them to see the context of the clips used throughout the mainline series for themselves to prove how you lied to them. You then abused YouTube's copyright system in an attempt to have our channel taken down when we mirrored those videos unpublished, meaning they could only be accessed via our reference list to try and bury said evidence as it was so damning. You didn't do it for my benefit. She's also lying about Levi in relation to his emails, whilst also using autism as an excuse for her behaviour, asserting, quote, "During this time, a friend of EOT who now runs the channel with them emailed me and I felt it was a bit aggressive, I was a bit defensive, didn't know how to respond, I was still new to having any sort of audience at the time, and being autistic, I'm not the best at interacting either people. So I asked my audience if anyone felt the same about this person, no one did. I asked for advice on how to respond, I got it. In the end, it was all a mess. I did not handle any of that well, and I regret it, and I've done a lot of learning since then. But not once did I expose who Levi was, not once did I or my audience attack him, not once was I training people to attack transgender people on sight. I was genuinely trying to do the right thing and make people feel safe, and I messed up." End quote. First, Levi was not a friend of myself, Ethel Thurston, founder of Essence of Thought, at the time he sent those emails. He was a member of Oates' audience, and he repeatedly told her, explicitly, that he was too afraid to approach her in public because of how abusive her cultivated community had become towards trans people specifically. Oates then took that and presented him as an aggressive trans person, which she has the nerve to reiterate here, in spite of the email being publicly available and, as anyone can see for themselves, not aggressive, effectively inviting her audience to tear into him publicly at the time, which they did. You know, the very fucking thing he was afraid of. Because whether or not he was named is irrelevant. Levi still saw Oates frame his email as aggressive and invite abuse towards him as part of a public spectacle. This was done, in my opinion, to make any trans person who even thought about criticizing her too afraid to do so, even privately. So again, a gross mischaracterization of the facts. I mean, she claims that she was looking for help responding, but in all instances of her publishing the emails, she had already replied. She had already written a response. She had already done the thing she was pretending to care about. As for her claiming that she realizes that she messed up and has grown from it, notice how nowhere does she specify the steps she took to fix things with Levi. Notice how she continues to lie about him, acting as if she had any justification via the aggressive remark. Where is her post apologizing in detail for what she did to Levi? Where does she go into detail about her actions without lying and apologize to him? Where does she tell her audience the truth of the matter for once in her fucking life? It doesn't exist because she's not sorry for doing it, she's sorry to herself for getting caught. But perhaps even more disgusting than that is the way in which she attempts to use her autism to defend her actions. Note that both myself and Levi are autistic, yet neither of us have engaged in such abusive behaviour towards any of our subscribers. Being autistic does not absolve you of the harmful shit you do, especially not to other autistic people. Whilst I wish I could say I'm shocked at Oates' attempts to exploit autism in this manner, I'm sadly not. Her one defense strategy, outside of weaponizing the UK's draconian defamation laws to try and silence her trans critics, whilst also arguing that hate speech is free speech, has been to present herself as the oppressed victim, which doesn't exactly work in relation to her behaviour towards the trans community. I'm sure we've all seen many bigots who reach for the very same defence when covering for everything from transphobia to racism, meaning Oates is merely adding herself to a long line of bigots who use mental health and neurodivergence to excuse their bigotry. Another lie, this time relating to the person she doxed in 2019, comes in quote, "A Facebook group called the Progressive Secular Alliance started posting about everyone. A screenshot of a public post on there was being shared around, and I was sent it and also posted it, asking this whole thing not to divide us and that we all come together to try and learn and support each other and educate people on important issues like trans rights. Thanks to editing their screenshots, EOT is now claiming this public post in an atheist Facebook group was a trans mental health support group which I went out on my way to dox and train people to attack trans people." End quote. The Progressive Secular Alliance would only go public months later, after it had served its purpose as a private trans-focused mental health support group for those harmed by the actions of the atheist community of Austin, in large part due to the actions of Oates' close and personal friend, Stephen Woodford of Rationality Rules. The group was private. The post was private. The leak docs real people, real victims who were being targeted and harassed by Woodford's audience. Now, in my video on the topic, I am clear that Oates publishing identifying information publicly was originally an accident. However, I also go on to explain how the fact that Oates kept the post up, doxing people, after she herself had acknowledged that she had published a person's real name on the post stolen from a private group, made it so her actions were morally indistinguishable from someone who had done so deliberately. To explain this, I use the analogy of a person standing on someone's foot without realising. A normal person would remove their foot and apologise the moment they were made aware of it. However, if they instead chose to press their foot down, continuing to stand on said person's foot, at that point, their actions become morally indistinguishable from someone who had stood on said person's foot deliberately. The intent behind the original action, or lack thereof, becomes irrelevant when you proceed to continue. As for editing the screenshot, the only edit I made was applying a black bar over the person's real name, a fact that is clearly acknowledged in the video. Quick side note, that black bar was added by me and is not in the original image, a fact we'll be returning to in a bit. Returning to that black bar mentioned earlier, it covers someone's real name, someone who fled the ACA after Oates' friend directed a torrent of abuse at them. So I have to wonder, what did Oates expect me to do? Dox a person like she did? If she has any proof of any further edits, please provide it. I know she won't, because she can't. The last thing I want to comment on isn't really a lie, at least not as far as I'm aware. It's just something I found really funny, and that is the following. Quote, "A lot of my videos contain info on stuff I spent years learning about. I don't just do a quick Google search and then talk for 3 hours. I compile info from like 20 different books that I spent the last decade reading each time." End quote. So she's claiming to put all this work into her videos whilst also defending her friend, who plagiarized a smaller marginalized creator. I just find that ironic. Like, she boasts about how much work goes into a video, yet is fine with her friend stealing all of that work, so long as it's someone else. It also makes me wonder whether she's being honest. As you might have gathered from this video and the mainline series, I don't consider honesty to be one of Oates' strong suits. So the fact that she's making such a big deal about this whilst defending a blatant plagiarist, I can't help but think back to how she defended Woodford whilst we were still concentrating on him as the anti-trans bigot. It's possible that I'm reading too much into things, so just take that comment for what it's worth. As for the rest of you, what do you think? Why do you think Oates exposed her friendship with Vangelina Skov? What are your thoughts about the compensation I sought for my stolen work? How do you feel about Oates' fence-sitting regarding the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help out, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make our work possible. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Gert Van Vorst, Marble Wings, Sosh Daniels, Flynn, and Higgins the Seagull. And for myself, Adita and Levi, take care now.